Hey, John and I are at it again. Today we have an episode focused on the 7 laws for launching a new business. So if you find yourself launching a business soon or just kind of pondering what it would look like to start a business of your own, or some friend of yours is starting a business, this is the episode for you. We're going to get into that action in just a second. But before we do that, I got to check in with John. John, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing good. I had like a, I don't know, had like a weird day. Like I kind of like, it's like snowed really hard here. So I spent like 2 hours in my car. You ever like, I don't know, you don't go anywhere. We both work from home. You don't go anywhere anymore. Like, what's the last time you spent like 2 hours in your car?
2 hours. I mean, I've done a road trip not too long ago. But yeah,
Well, that's like 2 planned hours though. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it was like
that's
6 planned hours. That was 2.
Right. Yeah. Like this
like
is it's different when it's like I had like a 2-hour commute to my office that's like 20 minutes away from my house. Like I just got an office so that there wouldn't be like kids running around and screaming while I was recording podcasts.
Yeah.
And and it like that 20 minutes, like there was just cars all over the freaking road, and like the cops were out, and stuff. I guess, that's normal. Cops are always out, I'm pretty sure.
They're somewhere always.
Yeah.
Like, they exist.
They are humans. They are human beings. Yeah, they do. They're matter and thus must occupy space. You're correct. Cool, man. All right. So yeah, let's talk launches. So I'll tell you, like, I came up with this episode idea for those listening. Casey, you already knew that. I think
I did know that.
Pretty sure you knew.
I knew I didn't come up with it, so
it just came from the ether. I was working on a launch lately, and it's been a minute, right? Because we both were sort of doing the e-com agency thing, and our agency specifically didn't like. I mean, we would do these audits or strategies for like go to market, what we would call go to market businesses, and like then we'd never really work on them usually. Like, I don't know, they just didn't like us. They're like, yeah, you guys seem cool, like, you know what you're talking about, but also like we don't really want to use you. So yeah, it's been a minute since I worked on like a launch. Like, it's like, hey, like, here's a new thing and you got to like crack it, right? And whatever that means economically. Yeah. So yeah, that's why this came to me, man. But so yeah, I came up with like kind of 7 thoughts, 7 ideas, and I think it's pretty relevant because that's kind of where you're at with like our podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We're kind of always we're like perpetually in uncharted territory for our podcast as we keep growing. Right. Like, it's something, we do have a couple of shows, so every once in a while there's some crossover from one show to the next. We kind of pick and choose little things that we know work, or little things that we've learned already that we can apply to other situations. But for the most part, we're kind of trailblazing, and maybe looking up some resources so that we can learn some information. And I guess that's kind of the inspiration around this episode, I have to imagine, is like, as you've looked through resources and just absorbed plenty of different, types of materials on starting businesses over the years, you kind of just want to take a stab at it yourself, huh?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think it is like, yeah, like, because you've kind of recently, moved into working on our shows full time, right? And moved out of doing as much agency work. So it's like you're kind of in this phase of like you're trying to like crack something, right? Like trying to make it work. We're trying to kind of like figure out the finances of it and all of that stuff, and like get more consistent levels of like listeners and viewers and stuff like that. And it's different. It's different than we're used to, because we're used to trying to just like, hey, can we make it work with paid traffic or whatever? So it's a little bit different, but that's kind of what's inspired this. So let's get into it. I came up with like kind of 7 laws, things that I would say, these are the laws of launch, right? The 7 laws of launch. You got to follow them. If you don't follow them, then you're far less likely to have a successful launch. So I'll go first. Should we just go back and forth with them? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah. You take the odds, I'll take the evens.
Okay, so I'll get 4, but that's all right. So first law of launch, what is it? Will you put the ticker up so I can remember what it is? There we go. First law of launch is singular focus. So I think that it sounds obvious that like if you want to be successful with something, you just need to focus on that and not really focus on anything else. Like, super obvious, right? But the problem is when people get somewhat successful in like business, when people get somewhat successful professionally, a lot of times they have like multiple things going on, right? They got this business that they already have going, and then they have this other business that they're starting. And so they don't give singular focus to the business that they're starting. They just like, they're kind of like splitting their focus. And like, Casey, you and I were sort of talking about this, where it's like, when you're thinking about something all the time, when like that's all you're doing all day every day, is you're trying to like crack that thing, you're trying to make it work, you're trying to like make it happen, make it profitable, whatever it is. And like you drive home, or you get caught in 2 hours of traffic, right, unexpectedly, or you're in the shower, you're taking a walk, and like that's what's coming to your brain, and you're thinking about different ideas. Like that's how you crack something. Like legitimately, it's not like, oh, the way that you crack something is you like do an ad and you do like, it's not even like any kind of tactical formula. The way that you crack something and make something work is by just thinking about it all the time and focusing on it constantly. And like, even if you're somewhat competent, you don't have to be like crazy competent. You just have to be like really obsessed with that thing, and you will get much better at it. And usually getting much better at it in a business world means like, you'll probably crack it. You'll probably make it work. If it's a viable business, you'll be able to make it work. If you just, and I would say this is like, this is number one for a reason. If you take nothing else away, like if you want to launch something, you want to make it work, focus on nothing but that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I'd add to that list, like, when you're in bed at night and you can't sleep and you're up staring
Yeah.
at the ceiling, like, what are you thinking about, And,
Right.
um, I think it's easy to apply this to, like a day job, like, slash, like, moonlighting, like, type of situation, whatever you wanna call it,
Right.
like, day job, side hustle kinda thing,
Right.
and people have the dream of, like, one day, like, my side hustle, that'll be what I do. I will love doing that. I wanna do it, and I think like the cold, harsh reality is like, I don't know, I'll throw out a random statistic and pretend like it's correct, but probably
Yeah.
85% of people never never that never actualizes. Like they never find
Right.
the opportunity where it's like now is the time to go, because they're waiting for the perfect moment when everything falls into place. But the truth is like you haven't given the energy and the effort that is deserved for that like secondary opportunity, that thing that you actually care about more maybe. They haven't built the foundation of that up enough for it ever really to blossom into a full-time thing that could maybe sustain them. And I'd say this applies to stuff that's uh not just career focused as well. I mean, if you want to do something well, just focus on it. It deserves your attention. So I think I would apply that definitely to career as well, as it's a pretty serious thing in most people's lives. Most people don't have the luxury of just kind of willy-nilly. If you're gonna take a shot at your side gig being your thing, like, I mean, you should have already been thinking of it in a very serious, singularly focused way. Otherwise it's gonna be you might it could be tough sledding.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that like, hey, from a practical standpoint, like you can't have a side hustle and have a full-time job. You certainly can. It's a great way
For
to make
sure.
extra money. Um, but I'm talking about like if you're trying to build a business, right? A
Right.
side hustle. We've said this before, like to each other, maybe not on the show. There's a difference between making money and building a business, right? Like those are not the same thing. They're two different things. And
Definitely.
so you can make plenty of money having a full-time job and doing a side hustle. If you want to build a business that has like
Mhm.
people work, like somebody's got to be thinking about it all the time, right? Somebody's got to be dedicating like kind of full-time singular focus to it. I think I heard kind of like an analogy earlier this week where somebody was like, look, let's say you have like 10 units of energy, because your energy, my energy, it is finite in a sense, right? Like we could get more of it by like being healthy, doing the right things, getting good sleep, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, there is an end of the day, right? Like we can't go 24/7, right? We have to sleep, we have to rest, we have to turn our brains off sometimes. And even if we could go 24/7, that's still finite, right? Like we can't live an infinite number of years, right? So
Oh,
energy is finite. The amount of energy and bandwidth you can put into something is finite.
yeah,
So if you
1.7 gigawatts, otherwise you're gonna go back in time, right?
exactly, right? Like
So,
you're gonna hop in what is it, the McLaren? Oh, I can't. The
DeLorean.
the
DeLorean.
DeLorean. I was not close. There was
That's
a
all right.
EN. There was an EN in there. Yeah, I don't know.
Weirdly, I think DeLoreans cost as much as McLarens because there's only like 200 of them or something stupid.
Yeah, but they're like really crappy cars, I've heard.
I mean, but like they're
That's
kind of cool
what.
though. They're
Yeah,
kind of cool though.
they're like they're iconic, but like I've
Yeah,
heard they're like not great cars. Yeah,
because of the movie, not because of the like
no,
technology.
not.
But we digress, right? Like,
Yeah, but yeah, we digress. I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so I think like if you've got, this is the analogy I heard, right? Like, so if you've got like 10 units of energy, right? Because your energy is finite, it's not infinite. If you've got 10 units of energy and you're spending, 6 on your day job and 4 on your side hustle, 6 on your day job, 4 on your side hustle, like you're making 6 steps of progress on your day job every day. So you're not even really doing as good as you could be at your day job. Right? Like you're kind of, I wouldn't say phoning it in. You're probably doing it about as well as you need to not get fired, but you're, or maybe a little better than that. Like maybe they're pretty happy with you. Maybe you're a good performer, but it only takes you 6 units of energy to be a good performer when you could be an incredible performer. If you use like 8, 9, 10 units of energy on your day job, right, but you're only using 6 on your day job, and then still you're only using 4 on your side hustle, and that is considering that all 10 of those units of energy are created equal. The truth is units 6 through 10 are less than units 1 through 6, right? Like your first 6 units of energy are already more valuable. So that I guess that's what I mean, is that I'm not knocking side hustles. I've definitely had them, and this is coming from someone who's always got multiple ventures going on, right? Like
that's really
Casey,
true. You got too
Casey
much
knows.
going on all the time. Casey
Yep.
knows. I do.
Casey knows.
And John can't help himself. If John frees up time and like eliminates something from his scope, he'll immediately pick something else back up because John can't operate at less than like 130% capacity. Like
Right.
bandwidth.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just, what am I even doing?
Being lazy,
with my life?
man.
I'm such a lazy bum.
Well, you only got like 3 jobs. Lazy,
right. But
man.
that's what I'm saying. I would never crack anything that way. And
Correct,
and I can say that, like I in a sense, like I've been working on doing some consulting in like info, right, and doing some work in info, and like it wasn't getting my full-time effort. Like we were like, you're launching an info product, right, that you want to scale to whatever, $30 million, $50 million a year. Like it's not just like, oh, let me do this while I'm doing it. It's not like a business already running. With a business that's already running, a lot of times you can just perform maintenance on it and it'll keep going just fine, right? But you want to get it up and running, like that's a whole other world. And like it didn't really come together and click until I started thinking about that and thinking about nothing else for a while.
I was just going to say, like, before we move on past this one, it's important to clarify. I used maybe a poor example for like most people. Like, don't go quit your day job because you want to do something else today. But John's example is better. Like maybe it takes like, hey, this week I'm going to give special focus to this thing that I haven't made the progress that I'd like to see, like
that's exactly
that
it.
kind of
yeah.
All right, number 2.
Go for it.
Your boy is now up. Casey at the bat. Mighty Casey taking a swing at number 2. Money loves action. So I think this could be phrased a lot of ways. I think that's probably true about a lot of these laws that we came up with, but money loves action. I would say is similar to like better done than perfect. You know what I mean? Like, especially when we're in like launching a new business, we're kind of in startup phase. We're in, it doesn't have to be like a full business either. It could be you're focused around like a certain offer or whatever it is, right? Getting something going, getting momentum, getting traction. Better done than perfect. Money loves action. Movement is what's important. That's how you get traction. You don't get traction from sitting still and overthinking about everything forever. Even though the thing that you launch, the thing that sees airtime, whatever it is, whatever scope you're doing, even though it might not be perfect, it might be a C- on a scale of like how good you might be able to do something. It's still better C- today than like a B+ next Wednesday, just as a general rule of thumb, because that's certainly not providing a lot of momentum and getting you a lot of traction early. Planning on doing something next week, 2 weeks out, because let's be honest, if you go like, that's going to happen next week, it's easy for that to get pushed again and again and again. And that's how these things never really get that lift and get off the ground. That's why money loves action. Get your movement going. Better done today than trying to be perfect next week.
I mean, we've done a sports metaphors episode before, so I won't go too deep here, but like there's kind of like a saying in basketball, like ball movement and player movement creates good things, right? So like, and it's like, a lot of movement and back cuts and like dribble handoffs and stuff like that, that a lot of the movement you see in basketball seems wasted, right? Because
Right.
that back cut didn't work. Somebody covered it. This didn't work. That's, but it depends. Yeah. Is it wasted? Yes. Somebody just used energy and they didn't get in position for an open shot, but it depends on whether you believe in the principle of like ball movement and player movement creates good things. And most successful basketball coaches and teams do. So I think what this really looks like in business a lot of times is like, or what it can look like is analysis paralysis, or it can look like you're, and I would almost say, it sort of tails off singular focus. Like you're doing a little bit in a lot of different directions. Like that's better than not doing anything for sure. Right. Like moving your feet is better than not moving your feet for sure. But like doing a little bit in a lot of different directions and not really taking very much action on anything. Right. Like, oh, I'll look into this and I'll, submit this, or I'll create my,
I'll brainstorm around yada yada.
I'll buy my domain, I'll set up my email, like, like that kind of crap. That's like, that's not action. That's actually you stalling and not doing action, for probably because you're afraid of failure. You're afraid that if you take the action and you do the stuff that you're supposed to do to make your business work, you'll actually try at something, and you'll either succeed and you won't know what to do with yourself, or you'll fail, right? Like you'll have tried, and this thing's been your idea and it's been your baby, and then you tried it and you actually put the effort into it and you failed, right?
Yeah.
That's what keeps people from taking the action. They take these little small micro actions that are very non-committal. If you actually want something to work, money loves action. If you want it to make money, you got to take big action, massive action, like impactful action, not stalling action, not little like things that make you feel like you check something off the list, but are actually keeping you from taking action.
I love the sports metaphor. Literally every time we bring it up on the episode, I love when we do a sports metaphor. But that in particular, it's easy in a sports performance to look at the end of the night. Maybe you didn't catch a game, but you like a team. You check a box score and you say, "Oh, my favorite player on the team didn't have a very good night." The box score doesn't tell the whole story. It definitely doesn't. It's such a screenshot, or such a snapshot of just like certain things that are generally important, but it does not tell the whole story. Same way, if you were launching a new offer, you were launching ads today, and they don't perform well, you check back a week later or whatever cadence you're on, and it's not performing how you wanted it to be. Like that's not a net negative necessarily. Something else that is not baked into those results you're looking at on the screen is you learn something then. And that is maybe as important. Maybe the whole business venture fails. Maybe it's a side hustle that you believe in and you want it to work, and it fails completely and you have to stop doing that thing. Well, you learned something pretty big there too, right? So like, again, like it, maybe then the next thing you do catches fire because you needed to learn the lesson. So again, money loves action in that way. It's still like, I'd rather fail quick if there's a good chance I'm going to fail, because then I can at least harvest the learnings and apply them to something else. So like, yeah, if you're afraid that you're going to fail and that's the reason for dragging your feet, you're only increasing the odds you're going to fail anyway. And you're decreasing the amount of time you'll actually be able, we have only a finite amount of time, and you're decreasing the amount of time you can use those learnings and apply them to something else.
And so if it makes you feel any better, right? Like if you heard that and you're like, oh my gosh, that is me. Like I'm avoiding action because I'm afraid, right? And yeah, there is this chance. Like if it's like, yeah, there is this chance that I'll try and fail, and so now you're kind of like, maybe I shouldn't try. I'll actually say this. I would say that, how often can you think of any times that we've seen a business like fail outright, in that it's like, we're no longer a business, we've decided as of this date to close up our doors? I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and it certainly happens with local businesses, but like usually it morphs is what.
I was just gonna say, in the experiences you're referring to, anything I can remember, I would say pivot is what happens. Not something did fail, sure, but like something else was kind of born along the way, and like and it's not changed.
Yeah, and that's why I said morph, because I was gonna say pivot. And a lot of times it's not like really one firm pivot. It's like there was like several pivots. We were still trying, and then finally something kind of clicked, and then one day it really clicked. And when it really clicked, the business actually looked like something that was a little bit different than the original idea.
Right.
And that's honestly how a lot of great businesses are made, is that it's like you hit that thing, that thing that really makes it click. And honestly, it's like, it's not what you envisioned at first, but you're like, whatever. I just wanted to be successful. Right.
Right. Definitely.
All right. Let's hit another one.
Boom.
Does it hit? All right. Yes, this is a good one. All right. So I'll take this one. Sell product, not brand, early on. And you and I have, in a sense, had like, with our podcasts, had like a little bit of a maybe argument about this or debate about it, where it's like the easiest way to communicate a value prop to somebody, like if you want a business to work and you want people to pay you, like selling them the idea of like, oh, I have this story about how, I didn't like the way that my pocket was all bulky. And so I set out to find a way to carry all the things that I need to carry, but make it so my pocket's not, it's like, okay, well, get to the fucking point. You know what I mean? Like, what does all that even mean? Or like, and then what I really discovered is that you're supposed to, you don't really need to carry all that stuff. And it's okay. So you selling me the idea of minimalism? Are you trying to sell me what, like, people want to be able to categorize you, right? Like people keep a mental Rolodex. That's what they do. Humans want to categorize, and they want to be able to file things into their own mental Rolodex. And if they don't know how to file your brand, your company, your product, your offering, or you as a person, whatever, into their mental Rolodex, they'll just be like, all right. Yeah, there's a contact card that's just like out in the ether. I don't even know how to categorize that or like what to say that it is. Right. And like what I say, we've argued about this a little bit on the shows, is that I've said, like, I think people will come for the content. They'll stay for like our brand, our character and stuff like that. Right. But like when you're first gaining traction and trying to sell people something, and this is very true in e-commerce, right? Like find a group of people that has a problem, or they have like a pleasure that they're seeking, right? Give them a way to get that pleasure or solve that problem, and then very clearly tell them about it, right? And that the best mechanism for that is just like, here is the solution. It's this product, it's this thing, it's this webinar, it's this course, it's whatever, right? And that is like, brand comes later, right? And you've said before, let performance dictate brand, right? Like maybe, again, like we've seen many businesses morph, right? So like maybe you need to let that like traction happen and that morph happen before you start thinking too much about what your brand is. But what you definitely shouldn't do is tell some story that is all convoluted, that like, you think will get people to buy into your brand, but they can't even figure out how to categorize you and tell themselves what problem you solve, right? Or what you'll help them achieve.
Right. I mean, even some of the biggest brands in the world were launched off the back of one product, right? Even
usually,
if they develop into something that has hundreds of SKUs or thousands of SKUs, like a lot of times there was that like 001 SKU or whatever, however you file it,
right.
that launched the whole thing. Like Nike started with friggin' some running coach making rubber shoes with a waffle iron,
On a waffle iron, yeah.
he was, and that's how the whole brand was created, really, and now Nike is probably one of the top 5 examples that comes to just about anybody's mind of like big brand, like they sell brand more than their products often now.
Yeah,
like,
right. At a certain point, you'll actually be able to do that, right? And it will actually be like the right move.
I was just going to say, not only can you should probably at a certain point to some degree.
Yeah.
But
Even still, they sell product plenty of the time, right? Like
yeah.
They still have plenty of ads, plenty of things that are featured. Hey, look at this product. Here's what it like. And they're like selling product, that solves a problem.
Exactly.
But yeah, you get to a point where you can start selling brand for sure.
But early on, it's like you said, like in your marketing, in your advertising efforts, you want to be speaking to your avatars about what can solve their problems. Like you were saying, well, a brand does not do that. I'm sorry. I mean, I know like later on in a brand's life cycle, you kind of like use that language internally, like around the culture, like our brand does so much for people. Your brand does nothing for people. The products that you ship to their house is what solves all the problems.
Right.
Like really the brand might make them feel warm and fuzzy when they, they've made their 10th order with your brand. They like you, sure, but
Right.
like they love your products. That's ultimately like the proof's in the pudding. They pay for your products, like,
Yeah.
and that's what they need.
That yeah, exactly. Sell product, not brand. One of the laws of launch. If you ignore it and you think, oh, brand first, you're gonna have a very hard time. We've seen it lots of times, lots and lots of times, especially in the. I don't mean to poo poo on VCs, but like especially in the VC backed world, it seems like they really want to sell brand first a lot of the time, and it's just like figure out a way to solve a really big problem people have and then tell them about it, and it's like that's about as complicated as it is.
And that's no coincidence, right? Because a lot of VC backers, they want that sexy big like home run
Yep.
swing. They want to be a part of the next Nike at the ground floor. So they go like, "Oh, these people, the brand they're kind of cultivating here feels a lot like they're going for something like Nike or Apple." And that's a trap, I think, as often as not. Probably way more often than not.
You know what
But
it is?
I'm no
Yeah.
VC like, expert. So I'm not going to tell them they're doing anything wrong, but sometimes I think they put the cart ahead of the horse for sure.
You know what it is I think that VCs buy into founders or founder teams more so than they buy into like unit economics of a business, right? They do their due diligence and they ask for the total addressable market and they ask for all that crap. But if you've ever been sent a deck, by somebody who's trying to raise funding, it's all just a lot of times made up numbers that they're like, oh, if we hit this CAC and then we'll acquire this many customers and stuff. And I'm like, you don't even know what your CAC's going to be. Like, how do you have any way of
Right.
benchmarking? Like, they're just
Right.
making up a benchmark usually, right? So it's like, it's to make those investors feel better. But at the end of the day, usually what they're buying into is the founders, right? Like, do I believe in this founder? And I think that's why, right? Like the founder can't sell the idea of like, hey, people have back pain and here's like a device that like solves back pain, and like makes people's back feel better. There's other devices that also make people's back feel better, but like I think if I tell people about back pain, about this one and how it's unique, people will buy it. Like that's not sexy. That doesn't make the people buy into you as a founder, right? So you have to, make it about something bigger than
I like your product, but you called it back pain reliever. Like that's not
right.
Anyway, I think it's time to move on to the next one because I think I've felt both of us at some point not try to give away future numbers that we're about to get to as we're talking through these ones.
Yeah,
So,
right.
boom, next one up. One banger makes a business. This is number 4.
One
banger makes a business.
I'm kind of jelly that you got this one, honestly. This one's a good one.
Hey, like you picked odds.
I know. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, hey, you're gonna get to talk about it, but essentially, the theory here is, in our experience, basically, like we've seen one ad, let's say, or one email, even one type of thing, one singular thing, can sometimes carry its weight and then a whole lot more. It can be the unlock to a whole new stratosphere of revenue that you thought was 6 months away, a year away. As we talk about those projections, these are the things you can anticipate. You hope for them, you want to see them, but you don't always know what the recipe is for a banger. It just sometimes, there's no other word for it in my opinion other than takes a little magic, a little pixie dust, something in there, something just clicks, the stars align, and something you set up that you believed in it, you thought it was going to be good, but you, especially when it comes to ads, hopefully you think all your ads are going to be good. You shouldn't be rolling out ads you think are going to suck. Every once in a while, one of them takes off beyond your wildest dreams, and it literally is outpacing all your other ads, and it makes you want to turn off everything else in your ad account, and you're living off that one banger. What you do after that, there's some strategies around that, but this is what we're trying to say with this one is look for those bangers. That you want to be doing things smart, but you want to be taking home run swings.
And so I will put it this way. This comes from all the stuff we're talking about, right? Like this is a buildup. If you have singular focus and you sell product, not brand, and you do whatever number 2 was, like
money loves action,
and you take lots of action, like over time, you'll start to realize like, oh, this is kind of impactful and this isn't that impactful and stuff like that. And then you'll focus in on the impact and then you'll like, it'll click for you. Right. So, the way that you and I think we're trying to be a little bit generalized here about like all business, right? But let's get specific and let's talk about e-commerce businesses or, e-commerce or info products or businesses that are businesses that have been primarily launched on the back of digital ads, Facebook and Instagram ads, or Google ads, I suppose, YouTube ads. Here's what I mean when I say one banger makes a business. Purple Mattress is a huge company. One banger, right? Like we've talked to them. We have another episode about it. They had better performing ads, but like that one banger created this massive ripple effect. Snow Teeth Whitening, huge company. They got Floyd Mayweather, right? Like that one thing got Rob Gronkowski on board, got tons of influencers coming to him asking if they could push Snow Teeth Whitening. Yeah, I mean, really any of those businesses that were like Harmon Brothers launched, right? It's like, that's what we mean. I hate to use the cliche, because I'm not like a ClickFunnels, fanboy. I'm not part of the ClickFunnels cult, you could say. But that whole like you're only one funnel away thing that's what we're really saying here is like you're one banger away. And I'm going to give another caveat to it. I don't think I've ever seen a business built that didn't have that breakthrough, that didn't have that banger, right? So the banger, like you have to find it. You do. Like it's not like keep looking for it. It's like you just got to keep working, keep taking action, keep with singular focus until you find it. And that's it. Like we've seen most of the businesses that we've ever launched that like grew huge, we can point to like, hey, they had this offer, and that offer that we thought was insane actually ended up backing out financially because the lifetime value on it was really good, or people actually took the upsells, or they had this ad and this ad just like cut their cost per acquisition in a third or a quarter. You know what I mean? Like it just cut it like crazy. And then they had all this product and they just scaled, right? Like it's almost always something like that. It really is. Media company, right? Like they, one of the media companies that we really admire, they found this one format of video. And I would bet at one point in time, one of them took off, you know what I mean? And then it was like the rest is history, right? Like one of our favorite comedians, Bo Burnham, he had a video take off.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? It's true. Whole personal business was built on that. So almost always it seems like an overnight success, but it's not. It's not an overnight success. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's overnight success that comes through all of that like focused action.
And that's exactly it. This is the perfect spot for this, right in the middle. 4 of 7, literally right in the middle. I think it does perfectly describe the first 3. It's kind of like what the first 3 ultimately like build up to, and even the next 3 that we'll be covering. This kind of does. This is the perfect like middle post to hold up the whole other 6 points, if you will. You know what I mean?
The whole
because as we talk about singular focus, like why was singular focus important? Because you won't crack it unless crack whatever you're working on unless you have singular focus. Well, the banger is what we mean when you crack it. Like you cracked it because a banger appeared, or Money Loves Action. Like that's basically about like getting reps in, and like, yeah, nobody hits a banger on their first. If you've never stepped up to a plate, never stepped up to home plate in a batter's box before, never swung a bat, the odds of you hitting a home run on your very first pitch ever in your lifetime is 0. I just hate to break it to you. It's 0.
Yeah.
But if you've taken a lot of action, taken hundreds of reps, the odds really swing in your favor that sooner or later you're going to hit one of those bangers, one of those home runs. And that is what we're saying is do all of these other things right. And this should just be a part of the process. You don't really have to go. You have to want them. You have to do all the work.
This will just happen. This will happen.
Exactly.
Right?
But you do need to be aware that it's happening and kind of take it, like let it happen. Don't get freaked out. Like it's okay. It's okay if you start push it in the ads case. It's okay if you start pushing a lot more budget towards those things, or you start rolling out like smaller variations. You don't have to go crazy with your concepts over and over again. You can do little tweaks once you find your banger.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I think sometimes people find the banger and then they just think that like, oh, that's the new norm. And it's like, no, that's your ticket. Like ride that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's easy to attribute that to the wrong thing. Like, oh, I remember that banger, the thing that we now know turned into a banger. It came from one of those shower thoughts, and you just go, oh, everything I think of in the shower is going to be a banger now. So let's think of something new. No.
Or you just think you're going to always be able to launch, like, hey, like you say, so this is actually, when I was in college, I ran track, and I had a coach who used to say, you're not your PR. And that's like that's not your self-worth. Like, no, he totally thought your self-worth was tied up in how good of a runner you are. That's not what I'm saying at all. But he would say you're not your PR. You're actually not that valuable. Right? Like,
because you can't run your PR every day.
You are the average of your best 3 races. Right?
Oh,
He had a very clear formula on it. So when you find your banger, don't now think that, hey, I launched this ad and it gets a $10 CPA. Like, let me make all my projections based on a $10 CPA. Bad idea. Like, you're not your best, you're not your banger, but like, ride that thing, right? Like, you gotta ride that, because honestly, like, that's what's going to give you all of your cash to put all the other things in place that, like, once you found that like breakthrough, that's when like the real hard part of business starts. Honestly, like the cracking it part is kind of the fun part, honestly.
Yeah. Only DJ Khaled releases only bangers. Just remember that.
Right. Yes.
And with Drake. That, John, boom, number 5.
Look for 95.5. Number 5 is look for 95.5. Lots of 5s. So 80-20 principle, most people are familiar with that. This is an extreme version, right? So 80-20, you've heard, some people have heard like, oh, there's the 80-20 principle, but then there's like the 90-10 and the 95.5. You could take it all the way, like the 99-1 principle. What I'm saying here is, like, don't look for the 20% of effort or the 20% of things you can focus on that's going to drive 80% of your results. Look for the 5% of things you can focus on that's going to drive 95% of your results. And I would actually say 5 is a good rule here for, like, if you're focusing on more than 5, again, singular focus on the business. And then within the business, if you're focusing on more than 5 things to find that like banger, to find that thing that's going to help you break through, it's too many. Right. So if you're saying, hey, I'm launching a business with ads, right? It's like ad, landing page, offer, like conversion process, right? Whether that's the checkout process or whether that's, a sales call funnel or whatever, right? Like that's 4 things. That's 4. 5 would probably be follow up, right? Things like your email and SMS flows and stuff like that, right? Like that's it. Like 95% of the time, that's all you should be focusing on. If it's partnerships, if you're launching with influencers or partnerships or something like that, it's kind of the same thing. It's like partnerships, partnership outreach, like how do we prospect and find potential partners? How do we reach out to them? How do we get them product? How do we progress the relationship with them? How do we partner more deeply with them? Like, that's 4 things. You know what I mean? Like, it's just 5. If it's more than 5, it's too many, right? So look for the 5% of things in the business that are going to create 95% of the results. Like the 5% of things in the business that are ultimately going to lead to the banger. If hey, what's going to give my business traction is finding the right offer, then just focus on that,
Right.
Don't focus on getting back to that vendor, that Shopify app vendor, to see if you can get it installed to, have your reviews pop up on the landing page. Like, that doesn't matter. Just focus on the thing that matters.
Right. And this is kind of assuming that you do have a lens for what matters already. Like, I think
you might not,
as we've kind of labeled this, like, for launching a new business, you might not be aware of what those things are right out of the gate. But I think
that's why money loves action. Just take action at first. That's
exactly. Fine. And it does come into focus a little earlier than we want to admit, even if it's a little fuzzy at first. I think the main thing we're saying is, like, don't kid yourself into thinking that a bunch of these little things that are kind of like, tertiary kind of items, they're not going to ultimately make the big difference. The primary things are what's going to make a big difference. And for those people, I think a lot of people are not numbers based, 95, look for 95.5. I don't know that I'd remember that, especially with the number 5 is 95.5. I mean, something that you've said for a long time that I think is essentially just the word version of this, not the number version, is find the littlest hinges that swings the biggest door. You know what I mean? The littlest things you can do to make the biggest impact. That's what you're looking for. Really, I think this one actually holds up pretty much all the way through the life cycle of a business. But
it's more important. To your point.
It's more important at the beginning, because anytime you're a new business, there's a little, usually at least, there's a little more insecurity involved. There's a little more urgency.
down the line in a business, it gets to more of an 80-20 thing. Like for example, I have an e-commerce brand, and we're good at the fundamentals. You know what I mean? Like we're tight with and it's very ad driven. It's ad to like a recurring membership thing. Our lifetime value is really good on the recurring membership. Our offer is really good. Our ads are really good. Our email and SMS follow up is really good. That's the fundamentals, right? We're really good at the fundamentals. So for us, yeah, we are getting more into like, oh, how do we have alternative traffic sources? How do we get affiliates involved? How do we improve our, how do we have fewer like credit card failures, right? Like just random stuff like that, right? Like, so yeah, it does start to expand and say like, okay, yeah, when you're really, really good at the fundamentals and you have like systems for focusing on those, then little hinges that swing little doors start to matter, because in a big business, a little door is still a lot of money, right? So you're doing if you have a $10 million business and you find something that gains you 2%, right? It's like, hey, that's $200,000, right? Like that's the little things start to add up. So it does start to like scope out to more like 90-10, 80-20 as you grow. But yeah, early on, it's like to find the banger. Just find the banger. That's really it. Like
that's it. I mean, we should have named the episode after that one. All right, moving along now. Beyond number 5, onto boom, number 6. Identify your hats. So what I
like
mean
this
by
one.
that is
You're
that
good at
this
this.
is a black hat from Grace Folly, not a sponsor. It is
camo.
camouflage. It's very green camo. No, what we really mean is, especially early on in a business,
it's like a baseball cap. You mean like whether it's a fedora or a top hat,
right?
baseball
Yeah.
cap.
Exactly.
Yeah,
is it a pirate hat? Is
great.
it like one of those
Next
little
one.
like hats that like they would wear at like old school like fast food restaurants that are like paper?
Yeah, like the paper hats.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what you call that hat.
What do you think the weirdest kind of hat is to wear while you're like working on your business?
Interesting.
I think like a top hat, like you're worried about keeping your head straight. You know what I mean? Like
I think it depends on the type of business. You know what I
that's
mean?
true.
Like if you're like some like I don't know, some like muscle dude like tatted up selling like supplements, like it'd be weird if you were wearing like a pink beret. You know what I mean? Like
right, yeah, it
be
wouldn't
silly.
fit. Yeah,
A little strange.
that makes sense.
Not hey, but wear whatever you want. I'm not the fashion expert either. So
but speaking of hats, what you mean is something different. You mean metaphorical hats, right?
What I actually mean, yes.
You're good at this. I'm glad you got this one because you're really good at this, I think.
Hats essentially in this sense equal roles or positions, and early on in a business it is extremely likely in our experience that you're going to find yourself understaffed, let's say, where you have to execute on 3 or 4 multiple jobs, and you don't get to focus on the one position that you'd ultimately love to do in the long term at this business, right? You have to do all the things. You have to be the friggin' guy who writes the ad copy. You got to launch the ads. You gotta pay the bills. You got to do all the things. You got to make sure everybody else gets paid. Maybe depending on what your business is, you're going to find yourself wearing a lot of different hats. And what we mean by identify your hats is while you're doing all that legwork, like great, by the way, it's great you're doing all that stuff. I think it's important to know your business inside and out as much as possible, and wearing a lot of hats, playing a lot of different roles will do that for you. While you're doing that, though, make sure that you're being cognizant of when you're taking off one hat. Oh, I'm being the ad buyer right now. Okay, this is what the ad buyer would be doing when I'm doing this and I'm launching ads. Okay, cool. That's the media buyer's job. I'm going to take that off now and pretend to be the guy who handles payroll and take this other hat, which I do not have another hat around. That would have been smart for me to plan that out. That guy wears his hat like this. And now I'm the guy who handles payroll, and I'm making sure everybody gets paid, so that in the future you don't have to spend time actively thinking about this stuff. You go, oh, thankfully early on I was dedicating energy as I was going to being aware of what these roles I've really already carved out are, and I can just slowly replace myself, or replace other people even.
And further, how much you need to replace yourself, right? Do you need a full-time finance officer, or do you just need to like someone who will handle payroll for you? You know what I mean? Do you need a full-time, head of marketing, or like do you just really need like a graphic designer and a media buyer, right? Or you know what I mean? So it's I think this is important, and this is not as important as the other things, right? Because traction and actually getting the sales are more important than anything, right? So this is like when you start to get traction, one of the biggest things I've seen happen is like people's business gets on top of them, and they get like burnt out from their own thing, their own baby, right? Like their own thing that they built that they cared so much about, and they put all this singular focus into, and they loved it, and they did all of the things to, they found the breakthrough that like made them actually get traction and actually have a business, and it gets on top of them because they're overwhelmed, because they have all of these tasks, like they're in charge of everything, and there's so much brain switching, right? Like it's not necessary. It's a lot of things. It's a long to-do list. Long to-do list is fine, right? But like a long to-do list where you have to like switch your mental mode a whole bunch of times, that's really hard, right? Like when you got to switch from like, leading a team and like getting, inspiring people, or, like leading people, and then switch into, spreadsheet mode where you're figuring out your finances, and then switch into a call with a vendor, where you're like making decisions. Like this is really, really, really hard to do. And that is actually what causes people to get burnt out and like kind of start to hate their business, and kind of be like, get to a point sometimes where they just are emotionally done, and they just say like, I'm out, I'm done. I don't even want to do this anymore. And like, depression amongst entrepreneurs is like it's like a thing, right? Like I've known, I don't mean to like, but I've known a couple people since I've gotten into this that like, I think it just got on top of them so much that they just were done in like a very permanent way. You know what I mean? And like way that I don't know if I can say on our podcast, but I think you kind of get it, right? And so that's what I mean, right? Like avoid that, right? Like I don't know, we kind of went down a path there, but like what I'm saying is avoid that by using the energy to say like, oh, this is right now, this is the job I'm doing. Right now, this is the job I'm doing. Right now, this is the job I'm doing. And ultimately, you might replace yourself entirely, and you might not be needed. Or you might say like, what the job I really like doing is this one. And you might even replace it. You like might hire a CEO to lead the business while you own it and act as the head copywriter. I think David Ogilvy famously did that in his agency, right? Like he hired a CEO to run his agency so he could be the head copywriter, and like that's what I mean. When you identify the hats though, you get a lot more clear on what it is you really like doing, where you're going to hire help, what you're good at, where you're going to hire help, what only you can do, all of that stuff. And when the business is getting on top of you, you have that mechanism for saying, well, it's because I'm doing 5 jobs right now. It won't always be like this because I'll hire this person.
Yeah, 2 quick things before we move on to the last point here about this stuff that you kind of triggered something to me. One, as we're at number 6 here, most people have seen most of the numbers we're going to reveal here, most of the laws we're going to reveal. We didn't even really know it ahead of time, I don't think, but I think we almost laid these out more or less in like chronological order of importance. So like is a great point that you mentioned that like this isn't so much like day one activity. This is more like early to mid, like in that later stage of early still, where you really want to focus more on this stuff because back to like kind of singular focus and like taking all your units of energy and all that stuff still applies. This is kind of when you start to like spread that out. Like this is an important thing to do. Don't underestimate the importance of this, because the other item I wanted to touch on here was often amongst entrepreneurs, there is like you said, it can be depressing. It can be lonely in particular too, because at startups, like it's not like you can pay a ton of people. We've been lucky enough to work with each other for a while now on, I don't even know how many businesses we've worked together on through agency and starting up our own things. And yeah, we've had that benefit, but not everybody does. And that brain switching, one of the things that's nice about us being able to have each other and reflect thoughts off each other is I think we've both kind of gained a much deeper respect for the people who have to do a lot of brain switching, because we've talked about it, and it doesn't seem like one of those things where like one task in one, or sorry, 2 tasks within one brain mode is 2 tasks. 2 tasks across 2 different brain modes might as well be 10 tasks sometimes. You know what I mean? Right. When you have to do the brain switching, like
right.
The act of actually switching your brain and kind of getting not just like, yeah, obviously I can think about like now I got to go pay people. It's not that hard. I just go to the thing and I pay people. But like there might have been a note that you kind of wanted to remember and little things and you just like the efficiencies are not there immediately. And brain switching is probably bigger than most tasks in and of themselves, like to really get into the state you want to be in to execute.
Yeah.
And the more hats you wear, the more brain switching that happens. And honestly, if you find yourself in that kind of headspace, I would recommend like exploring conversations with people about those types of things that you're feeling. That's not really what this show is about. Not
Right.
about the psychology of entrepreneurs, but maybe something interesting for another episode.
No, I mean that, and I think that's like we've talked a lot of tactics on this show, right? So but I think it's like, as much as I always, you know how I feel about like the mindset gurus, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no, sure.
I've never loved it, but at the same time, it's like the longer you get into this, the more you realize like a lot of it is mindset, a lot of it is not tactics, right? A lot of it is your mental and emotional intelligence.
You know what?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. That's it.
I was going to say that I think makes for an interesting bridge into boom, our last point, number 7. John.
Yeah. I like the way we worded this one. A little call out to Casey's 49ers. Bill Walsh was the name. The coach's name was Bill Walsh. Yeah, Bill Walsh wrote the book, The Score Will Take Care of Itself. The principle being, if you do all of the things you can control, this is a principle I believe in big time. If you do all the things that you can control, like you do all the right things within what you can control, the score will take care of itself, right? Like you'll win the game if it's reasonable for you to win the game, right? And this is a little play off that, and that is culture takes care of itself. I would highly recommend that early stage during launch. One law of the launch is I don't think that you should spend a lot of time discussing culture, because culture will take care of itself if you are working with the right people, right? So if you're working with people who you just know have similar values to you, who just are just as motivated to make it crack as you are, to make the business work as you are, and like have maybe similar or complementary expertise levels, the culture will take care of itself. Like over time, and I would almost say culture sometimes is dictated by whatever it is that makes the business gain traction, and the kinds of people that you end up having to hire for that, and the kinds of mindset that you end up having to have around that, right? If you have like something that where it's like, oh, the way that we find success is through some mechanism that has a really low hit rate, right? Then one of your culture points is probably going to be like, hey, next at bat, right? Like next shot, don't worry about failure, move on. That's going to be like a culture point, right? But if you actually your business is built around something where the hit rate is really high, then your one culture point is going to be like, don't give up, right? Like don't give up on that thing, right? Because we only have so many shots at it, type of thing. So like that, I mean, and that's like a really broad example. But the main thing I mean here is that like, if you work with the right people and you guys are all on the same page and similarly minded, like you don't have to be the same, you don't have to think the same, but if you're all on the right page and you're all just as motivated to make it work as each other, you don't need to have the culture talk. The culture works on day one. But when you start having to have the culture talk is when you're going to start intentionally bringing outside people into the business, right? So, hey, we need to intentionally start hiring for these roles. That's when you start needing to have culture talks. And so I'm not saying culture is not important. I'm just saying it's not important on day one. What's important on day one is getting the right people on board. And then, I mean, at some point you define values and then culture kind of takes care of itself from there.
Yeah, and even to the point of having the right people. I mean, that's I think the number one block on the way of how culture takes care of itself, for sure. Because people, you can say the same thing day in day, first thing in the morning, last thing before everybody goes home. If you work in if you're not remote and you work in an office with people, you can be like, that's our motto, that's our thing. You can say that till you're blue in the face. That does not make culture. The people will make the culture. You know what I mean? Like it's going to happen one way or another. It's going to take care of itself one way or the other, whether you end up with a good culture or a bad culture. I think that speaks more to the people that you've surrounded yourself with, put in your business, And then, I think Similarly to how we say let performance dictate the branding, like externally to customers, internally to employees, similar thing. Maybe there's a better word than performance for it, but essentially I would say let performance dictate culture too. Because
Yeah.
somebody who's found success doing something, when let's just assume for a second it's not you, just to not confuse the issues, employee A has really found their niche within your business doing a certain thing. Maybe it's sales, for example. Let that person kind of lead by example, and the culture will kind of just cultivate itself as more people inevitably kind of flow into that department as you scale. You know what I mean?
As you try and replicate your highest performing team members, you will end up with people with similar sets of values, and or similar personality types,
Mhm.
and the culture will happen, right? The culture will happen amongst those pieces. Sales is a great example. People who are
Right.
really, really good at sales, they're a certain kind of person. People
I
who
was
are
just gonna
real,
say it too,
yeah,
because
right? Like,
that's a mistake. That's a trap that could be you could easily fall into, because not all entrepreneurs are the same. But you might be like, you know what? When we get to the point where we're hiring salespeople, we're not going to have pushy salesmen who only focus on
yeah.
making money for themselves and whatever cliche you want to think of for the most salesy
We're not gonna have
salespeople of all
sales. We're
time.
not gonna have sales bros. You
You
know,
know why those salespeople act like that? It's because that's what works.
right?
And maybe you have your own little angle on it. You still have your own little internal uh, you know, culture in your office or wherever you work. Uh, you need to let things take care of themselves. I think this actually goes well beyond culture, but culture might be the single biggest thing where we've seen people try to get again ahead of themselves and be like,
Yeah.
this is the culture we're laying down today, day one, and we'll always live by these things. Literally day 5, you might be like, well, we really put our foot in our mouth too early on that one because we already have it to like kind of audible here.
Well, yeah, like let's say the people who really like drive your business forward are salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
That business is gonna have a certain kind of culture, right? And depending on what kind of salespeople they are. Let's say the people who really drive your business forward are tech people. Like they are different. They're different, or the people who really drive your business forward are like really analytical entrepreneurs, right? Or really analytical, whatever marketers, whatever it may be, or they're HR type people, right? Like they're people, like whatever it is that the culture will. I don't know how to say it any better way than the culture will take care of itself as the business gains traction. um, I would say that at some point in time, you should define a set of values,
Yeah.
core values, and they should be meaningful. They shouldn't be like, integrity and stuff like that, where it's like what we see happen a lot, and this happens with culture and it happens with core values, is company says one thing, but their actions dictate, or their actions show another thing, right? Company says we care about high quality work, but their action dictates they actually care about high volume of work, high volume of output, even if it's not the best quality, right? So
Yep.
like quality is one of our values, when it's like actually quantity is a value of yours, right? And that's when people get like this dissonance, and that doesn't usually happen until the company's bigger. So like, I know this is laws of the launch, we don't need to get into that, but the main thing is like, yeah, you don't really need to get into that, honestly, in the launch
Yeah.
phase.
As we do peek forward into the future, though, if you're finding yourself like maybe you're like, yeah, I kind of knew most of these things, but like it kind of makes me feel good that John, in case you're saying these things on their podcast.
Thank you.
I would, yeah, thank you first of all. As we talk about like even core beliefs or culture, um, maybe I think we agree on this, John, but maybe slightly different. I would say also leave some wiggle room for it to develop and change. Like maybe early on, like you said, like quality is a core belief. That makes a lot of sense at a certain point. It also makes a lot of sense that at a different point along the timeline, like you said, like quantity. Hey, actually, seems like a lot of our recent wins have been on the back of quantity, not necessarily the quality. Like, that's just one random example we're throwing out. But core beliefs can change. They can. I think it's leaving the possibility for them to evolve is
Right.
important.
I
Not
mean,
being so rigid, but at the same time, knowing why they're important to you. And as long as the reason that they're important to you still exists, then that probably still is a core belief.
Yeah. I mean, I think certain ones might stay the same. And what I mean when I say like core beliefs is like a core belief of, I believe, and we haven't really defined this, but I'll give an example. A core belief of our media company that is primarily driven by you, Casey, actually, right? More so than me, is modern traditional media is inherently flawed. And alternative media is a better alternative, right? That's like a long-winded version of it, but it's like I don't think that core belief is likely to change. But what you're saying is like, as information changes, my opinion might change, right? Like that might not always be the case. So if that's like a core belief our company's built on, and the whole thing's going to crumble if we can't believe that anymore, then it's like, well, if modern media, if modern traditional media fixes itself somehow, then like maybe that won't be true anymore, and we still need a reason to exist, right?
Even in your one-off example here, there's evidence for that kind of like, I mean, you're seeing at a staggering pace, all of a sudden, I want to say just in the last year, 6 months, more so even than that, news programs are taking clippings from people's podcast and reporting on the podcast stories as their stories, which is just the weirdest thing if you think about that for a second. But it's because they're realizing like, hey, this is just a better format and we can't really adapt to it completely, but what we can do is use it and then kind of take the essence of what they're talking about. And it brings this conversation from this weird place in media where maybe like it's just like old school looking, might as well be 1970 into like the modern day. And I do think I think you just threw that as an example, but I think that's a great example because I think we're likely to see traditional media that's backed by so many dollars, so many powerful people. I mean, they're not stupid. It's just a slow, the bigger something is, the slower it moves. So, but they're cognizant. They're realizing like, okay, the destination is a few degrees off of where we thought it was. Maybe it's always evolving too.
Right. We're definitely seeing, I wouldn't mean to go down this rabbit hole, but like we're definitely seeing some networks, ESPN comes to mind for this, that have like a 30-minute show or a 60-minute show that's actually a podcast. You know what I mean? Like what comes to mind on ESPN is Jalen and Jacoby, right? Jalen Rose's podcast. It's a podcast. I think that's how it started, but it's an ESPN show. TNT has Charles Barkley's podcast on there, Steam Room, I think it's called. It's a show on TNT, but like it's a podcast. It's the same thing you would watch on YouTube for, if you were trying to watch Joe Rogan or if you were trying to watch Charles Barkley or whatever. So yeah, like it definitely could see an evolution there. So if your again, like bringing it back here, the culture, like you don't have to force culture. You don't have to force core values. You don't have to force a belief system. You could be solving one problem today, and maybe that's not a problem in the future, and your company evolves and is solving another problem in the future, right? So like, just don't be too rigid about it, I would say. And also don't worry about it when you're trying to launch.
Correct. Absolutely correct. It is important to remember this is an episode about launching a business. We went a little on that, but hey, if you listen this far and you deserve it, you're worth it. John, we've been going a little long, so I'm going to challenge you to give me the briefest of brief, the most condensed, the most poignant. Pretty sure I used that word correctly. Not 100% sure. The most relevant, the best parting shot that we've ever seen, and the best parting shot possible for this episode about the 7 laws for launching the business. If somebody couldn't listen to the whole episode, they could only listen to this 30-second blurb. John, what do they need to know?
Yeah. So this is 7 laws of a launch. So a few things there. These are laws, meaning you must follow these or you will likely have an unsuccessful launch. But what these 7 laws all lead to is ultimately a breakthrough point. In almost every single successful business launch that I've ever been a part of has a breakthrough point. They have a banger ad or a banger partnership or just some kind of banger, something that is a breakthrough point for that business launch where like before it was like maybe going to be a thing we don't really know. And after it's like our lives are changed forever, right? So all 7 laws are designed to get you to that point. Follow them, and your likelihood of finding that breakthrough point is much, much higher.
Well, John, I gotta say you nailed it, man. And Modern Commerce, you really nailed it for sticking around a whole hour and 5 minutes into this episode. Great job. Give yourself a round of applause. All right. John didn't even thank you. Thank you. Really, you're the rest of the audience, right?
Sorry.
Also, Modern Commerce, if you've made it this far, please hit the like button down on this video. If you are listening on an Apple Podcast app or you're listening on Spotify, rate the show 5 stars for us. Do your part. Make sure you drop a review onto our podcast so that other people know that they're going to want to listen to this show as well. And Modern Commerce, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, I don't know what you've been doing, honestly. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon. What that will actually do is give you notifications onto your smart cellular device for when we go live, so you can jump in on these shows with us. And until next time, Modern Commerce, see ya.